day, everyone. This is Bob Roswick with the Bismarck Air Museum, and with me today is Tom Trousdale, our docent, and we're going to talk about the Orion. How are you doing today, Tom?
Great, Bob.
Let's see. I'm a little late getting here today, and Tom asked me if I had a headwind, and I think I did. In this episode of the Docent and the Doctor, we're going to talk about the Orion, and that's what you see on the screen here. And this Orion is actually in Bismarck, North Dakota. What can you tell us about what we got here, Tom?
Well, believe it or not, this is probably Northwest Airways at the time. It was Airways, not Airlines, until the airmail scandal came. Then they changed their name to Northwest Airlines because they had to keep their airmail account. The interesting thing that, first of all, this was probably taken between 12:30 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the reason I say that is we just looked up an old Northwest Airways schedule, and this was probably came in from St. Paul and got here at 12:30 and remained on the ground until 2:30 and then went back to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the flight number was 52. It came in as flight number 51. The wings, which you can't see at the top, had a big black stripe on them, which was quite attractive with the Northwest Airways insignia painted on. And the fuselage stripe that you see there is a bright red. So with the black and the bright red on that bright white airplane, it is actually quite attractive. And you see the father and the little kids out looking at the airplane and admiring it. And he's probably telling them, someday you'll fly on one of these.
Yeah, this is a great picture. And we were just talking earlier about the fact that we're looking at black and white pictures, and we kind of miss out on all the color and some of the beauty of these airplanes.
Yeah, they really do. Every one of them was painted with a real unique paint scheme in the days, simply because that was the way people noticed them. The brighter and the more colors that you had in it, the more people would notice them, and then, of course, it called attention to the air transport.
Well, they're birds after all, and birds are flashy, you know.
You better believe it.
I think the one thing I like in this picture is that if you see there's a couple of toddlers here. So this guy's bringing out some really young people to see this. And this photo actually comes to us from the Bismarck archives in the Bismarck airport. And you can see it's kind of tough on both sides, but we pressed it out in some glass and got a picture of it, and actually had to touch up the color. It was very faded. Shows a little bit of service work here on the side, a couple people standing behind it, but this is, from the best of our knowledge, it's on the Bismarck airport grounds.
That would be correct.
All right, this is a nice picture, kind of shows some of the features of the airplane. Tom, tell us a little bit about this plane.
Well, there we go right off with a color scheme that is fantastic. This was owned by the Shell Aviation Organization, and believe it or not, it was flown by Jimmy Doolittle. The interesting thing about the Orion is the top speed of it was 220 miles an hour, and it was faster than most of the bi-wing fighters of the day. So it was a little hot rod, and of course Doolittle was a racing pilot, so he was right at home flying it. And it was an interesting airplane. There's only one left in the world, believe it or not, and that is at Zurich, Switzerland. It's in the Museum of Swiss Airways. Later on, we're going to talk about Paul Mantz, or we will mention him somewhere along the line. Paul Mantz used it in his movie-making days up until the late 50s, and then Swiss Air bought it because Swiss Air wanted to have a model of every airplane that they had ever flown in their museum.
So let's just, I want to just touch base just briefly about, so this airplane was made by Lockheed, and the interesting thing about Lockheed is that their whole stable, their pedigree, they all were fast airplanes.
They all were fast airplanes. They all were named after stars or objects in the sky. They all were very well designed. You talk to people that flew Lockheeds, and they say they were years ahead, whether it was the Orion with retractable landing gear and a constant speed prop and flaps, or you talk to someone that flew the TriStar, the 1011. They say that was years ahead in design over the DC-10.
Now, this plane is also from the 30s, and we still had operating biplanes at that time. In fact, we were looking a little bit at when this plane came from on the timetables. When when the passengers came to Minneapolis, they were flying in a what?
They were flying in a Ford Trimotor. That we had some pictures of that and discussed that earlier, and that had 14 passengers. This one just had 6 passengers.
So we probably doubled our speed on the way to Bismarck.
We definitely did by getting in the Lockheed.
Interesting. So usually when you come to Bismarck, it's a step backwards, but not in this era, right?
Not in this era. This was the cream of the crop.
Okay, what we have here is another picture. Tom, tell us a few things about this photo.
Well, this was owned by the Hal Roach Studio, and airplanes, believe it or not, were used quite frequently. Matter of fact, we just came back, my wife and I, from Tucson, and we went out to old Tucson, where they made and shot movies, still make them today in TV commercials, and they still have a gravel airstrip out there where they used to fly in aircraft probably to make the movies. And of course, with Hal Roach Studio, Hal Roach made a lot of movies in the 30s, the Our Gang comedies and Fatty Arbuckle and so on. This airplane probably made frequent trips between Tucson and Los Angeles, hauling the stars back and forth.
Okay, we got a little bit of a little thing that I'd just like to touch on is that we have a pilot that sits at one level and we got the passengers that sit at another level. Tell me about that.
This was noted by the Lockheed. It was the same with the Vega. The pilot sat up above, and really you could talk to the pilots, but there was a opening that separated the pilots from the passengers of about 2 feet. So there was no way to get up into the cockpit. Of course, who would want to, because the cockpit only held one person. So the pilot sat up above the engine for better visibility and flying of the aircraft. The other thing, we talked about the Lockheed. You can see on the tail the Lockheed with the star symbol. That was their symbol and still is a symbol of the Lockheed Martin Aircraft Company today. As a matter of fact, when in the 30s, the actual name was the Loughead brothers, who started Lockheed, but they called it Loughead after their name. Well, when a gentleman bought the Lockheed Company, he didn't want to call it the Loughead Aircraft Company, so he changed it to Lockheed. But he bought the whole aircraft company for $25,000 in a bankruptcy sale back in the 30s.
That's an amazing story. Okay, Tom, I'm going to put you on pause, and we're going to bring this episode of the Docent and the Doctor to a conclusion, and we'll pick up with the Orion with our next episode. The Bismarck Air Museum Foundation is trying to capture and restore the building you see before you, the large round-top hangar at the Bismarck Airport known as Hangar Number 5. Log on to our website at bismarckairmuseum.org. Give us a donation. Log on to Facebook under Bismarck Air Museum. Subscribe to this channel on YouTube. Once again, I'd like to thank Tom for helping us understand these iconic photos.